This is Show Up as a Leader, a show from PeopleForward Network, helping you maximize your positive impact on the world by becoming your best, fully authentic self. Hey everyone, it's Rosie. I'm just going to forewarn you. I know I have said this about other shows, but for real, this episode, you are going to want to listen to it more than once. If you are listening to this while you are out and about, you're going to want to re-listen to it so that you can stop and take some notes. There is just so much richness in this conversation that I had with Jess Goldberg. I think she's another one of my sisters from another mister, but she is just amazing, amazing, amazing. She was VP at an AI robotics company. She teaches a course at Columbia University. She is just a master at looking at this intersection of AI and how we need to rethink our human skills in this world. And we talk a lot about her background, and you're going to want to listen for her robot, Moxie. She talks about where AI falls short and where our humanness needs to step in. And then we really spend the rest of the time looking at how do we grow our influence. And we go through some of her 8 archetypes of influence and very tactical things that we can do. How do we really create reciprocal relationships? We have a whole conversation about when we're experiencing resistance, where does that need to go? And you're going to want to listen all the way till the end because she gives you a link, and it's also in the show notes for really, really great resources and downloadable handouts and tools that will help you show up as a leader in your life, help you grow your influence, help you effectively build reciprocal relationships, which are needed in a world of increasing disconnection and AI. Just lots and lots of really good richness and fun in this conversation. Take a listen. Jess, I am really, really, really looking forward to having what I think is going to be another one of my favorite geek out sessions with you today. And I say that because in the work that we do, we're all about rehumanizing workplaces and future-proofing leaders and teams to better navigate change and disruption. And one of the things that we are continuing to see at probably an escalating rate is that in this world of AI and of increased technological advances and disruption, that those human skills are needed more than ever. Like AI can't feel, AI can't build relationships, et cetera. And there's a gap of our human skills. And this is your jam. And so I just think this is such a timely and awesome conversation because you used to work in the AI space and you know this firsthand. So tell us a little bit about your background in AI and how you see that connecting with what I just said of why I see our human skills being even more important today than perhaps they were even a couple of years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to geek out with you. There's a lot that we're going to dive into today. I'll start a little bit with some of my background. So yes, I worked in the AI space previously. I was a VP at an AI robotics company that was building a robot named Moxie. It was a physical robot, and my team was responsible for building the kind of voice and personality of who is this robot. And it was a social emotional learning robot, surprisingly. And so I was really on the cutting edge of how far can we push AI? What is it capable of and where are we pushing it? At the same time, I was also teaching at Columbia University, which I still do right now. I teach leadership and communication skills. So I was noticing this juxtaposition of how far can we push AI, but what are the skills that we uniquely as humans are still going to need? And this is something that continues to come up. I think with each technological advance, we get to learn a little bit more about what it means to be human. Because we get to learn, oh, this is actually something technology can offload. Maybe that's not what makes us uniquely human. And I take this back to this is something that's not just right now. This is something that has happened with every technological advance. I mean, we think about the age of agriculture, and it used to be 80% of the US was working in agriculture. Now, less than 2%. So how many people today would say that picking berries is what makes them human? They wouldn't. And so perhaps some of the skills that we think about right now is, oh, that's my job. That's what makes me valuable. Writing a perfectly grammatically correct sentence is maybe not what makes us human. And so what we're learning right now, and this may evolve in the coming years, every year it might evolve that we might learn new things, maybe are not the skills, but right now some of those key skills, one that's going to be really important is adaptability, our ability to change. Our ability to deal with the new situations is going to be really important. And our morality is really important. The ability to decide between what's right and wrong. AI systems, they need that system instructions. They need someone, a human, to make the decisive factor of what's the goal. And so we as humans are going to be the ones that are going to need to input those goals. But in order to input those goals, we're going to have to negotiate with each other about what's right, what's wrong, and where do we want these systems to be. And so relationships within the workplace are still going to be incredibly important. Many of us might be working in tandem with AI, using it to accelerate what we do, but we're still going to be working with other humans. And so we're going to need to build those relationship skills about how do I actually build that interpersonal relationship, about being able to understand the other person's perspective, understanding how do I work with them? How do I influence them? We can't just only offload that to AI. It won't do it. We're seeing a lot of studies show that when people know it's an AI system, they don't trust it as much. And so a lot of trust is going to be built by someone else who has experienced similar things as you do. It's not going to be built by just a system.
Oh my god, there is so much richness in that I'm just like, "Yes, yes, 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 yes." Something that just came up for me as you were talking, Jess, is AI is only as good as the inputs that go into it, and here's what's so funny is we do know it's flawed, and we know that it needs a human oversight, and just, like, if you haven't done this yet, go to ChatGPT, you don't have to have an account, the free version, and type in your name, like, "Who is" fill in the blank. I did this the other day, literally, and I put who is Rosie Ward, and I was like, it said I worked at a company, I founded a company, I didn't. I was like, there was pieces in there. I was like, where are they getting this? So then I decided to put, are they pulling a different Rosie Ward? So then I put, who is Dr. Rosie Ward? And I got a little bit more. And then I put, who is Dr. Rosie Ward? Salveo Partners. And it was so fascinating. And I was like, okay, they're getting there. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. But you wonder, where the heck are they pulling some of this stuff from? And like, it goes back to, yeah, the inputs, right, are not fully accurate, and you need critical thinking. You need, to your point, communication, and you need that adaptability. And yes, we can create adaptable systems and adaptable programs, but human beings, we are kind of hardwired to go in the opposite direction, to when things get more disruptive, when things get more where we need to adapt. It's a paradox because we actually are unable to, because of our biological hardwiring, to cling tightly to what is familiar, to minimize reward, to maximize threat. So we do show up defensive with other people, or we show up clinging to people who think like us, act like us, look like us, love like us, etc., because that's safe. And people who are different than us have a different opinion, have a different way of going about it. You start to see those clashes in all kinds of areas. And if those people are trying to build these systems and trying to evolve us, that's going to be hugely, hugely problematic. So I love that you brought it back to the relationships, because machines can't truly form relationships. Machines can't emote. I know you did like the Moxie, but they can't emote. It's a program we've put in them. So I think you're right. We have to rethink, what is our value proposition, and that it's not what I do, it's what are the things only humans are equipped to do, to communicate, to relate, to feel, to critically think, all of those types of things in concert with other human beings. And we have to deal with the messiness of being human, which is our emotions, which is our fears, which is our narratives, all of that stuff. So I am 100% on board with you, and I think that this is so, so critical, because people call that stuff the soft skills or the fluffy stuff, but they're power skills and essential skills at an escalating rate because of the escalating rate of technological advancements, don't you think?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So the interesting thing is the reason why they're called soft skills is because the US Army, they actually named it soft because they were trying to distinguish between hardware and hardware skills. And so it wasn't actually soft as though they're easy, it's that they weren't hardware.
Yes, I love that you brought that up. I learned that a couple years ago, and I'm like, I don't think a lot of people know that. Yeah, it was like hard skills were the stuff with like artillery and machinery, right? It was like hard, like metal, like those things. And yeah, and somehow we view hard and soft as fluffy, soft as weak, soft as less than, but it really wasn't. So I'm so glad
It's a
you
complete misnomer.
yeah, right? Like, people go look it up. We're not making this stuff up. So yeah, but it's how it gets interpreted. It's the context, it's the meaning we add to it that, kind of messes it up or makes it seem like it's not as important. So let's talk then. So we know it's critical. We know it's important. Moxie can't build relationships, right? So how do we, if we're going to have these more human, more connected, more effective, higher performing workplaces, if relationships are that fulcrum, and we've got to be able to influence differently. How do we start to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first thing I will note is robots can build some form of relationship, but it's not really reciprocal. So we might actually feel some sort of emotion. Many people right now are using GPT as their therapist or Claude as their therapist. And so there is ways in which we do build relationship with it, but it's a very different kind of relationship. It's not truly reciprocal because does that robot truly actually care about you? That is not the fundamental underneath it. But we can actually develop a place in which we might feel something when relating to it. So I just wanted to distinguish that a little bit. And so we're mentioning, how do we actually start to build relationships within the workplace? So part of it comes down to I built these 8 archetypes of influence, which we can go into, which goes into how as leaders we build relationship. But the foundation of relationship is reciprocal, that we are having an exchange between both what are we feeling, what do we need, and what is going on for the other person, and building that sense of understanding each other, which is something we've lost a lot in the United States, particularly, is an openness, a curiosity, an ability to understand one another. Relationship is not, I just want my point to be heard. And it's not, I'm just going to let, whatever is right for anyone else go along too. It's not people pleasing. Building relationship is that place of playing between what's right for me and what's right for the other person. What do I need to understand about myself and what do I need to understand about the other person? It's that in between energy.
Yeah. I refer to it as the what am I needing, what are you needing, right? So we can find that win-win versus so often it is that win-lose. To your point, it's, I just want to be right or I want my way. And that rarely works well because I think probably weekly when I'm facilitating stuff, I ask audiences when I'm presenting this framework we use, how many of you like to be on the losing end or like to be made wrong? And nobody ever raises their hand. And usually you get these cringy faces. They're like, no, because when someone is intentionally or inadvertently doing that to us, we shut down and we go into defense mode, whether that's shut down or we want to fight back or whatnot. We stop listening to one another. That reciprocal nature goes away, to your point. And you're right. We've lost a lot of that in this country. We've lost a lot of it in the world, quite frankly, because this show has a global reach. And we have to find a way to get that back because it's eroding so many things. It's eroding trust on a team level, on a societal level, and everything in between. And it's gonna get harder if we don't do that. So I wanna talk about those 8 archetypes of influence because I think we a lot of times sit back and think, "I can't do anything." We get resigned to, like, "I can't influence. I'm just one person." But part of being a leader is growing our influence.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important. And what we were just talking about with relationship is, so Google did a study maybe about 10 years ago. It's called Project Aristotle. And they wanted to see, what are the teams that are the best performing teams? Why do some teams perform better than others? And what they discovered in looking at all their teams were the teams that performed the best were the ones that had something called psychological safety. That is the basis, the earliest stage of relationship is that we feel safe to express what's going on for us. We feel safe to say, hey, I see a problem, or hey, I have an idea I'd like to share. Building that's the foundation because it's a precursor to trust, which is a precursor to having a relationship. And so we cannot actually build innovative teams and innovative companies unless we have that. And so as leaders, we need to be cultivating that. And we need to be learning, okay, how do I actually drive forward the business results that I want to hit? Well, it's not just me saying, oh, this is my idea and forcing everyone to believe it. Because, like you were saying, it feels pretty bad to be on the losing end. And what does that feel like? Well, it often feels like maybe compliance, but not commitment. And so, if we have our employees who are in a state of compliance rather than commitment, we're going to lose them in the long term. And we're not going to have them continuing to want to do the good work, which means that we're not going to be able to influence them and drive forward the meaningful results that we actually want to hit.
100%. I love that you started with that, Jess, because one of my favorite people to quote with this whole discussion is Margaret Wheatley, and she says, people only support what they've helped to create because we are hardwired for autonomy. And so when someone is just shoving it upon us, when we've had no say, when they haven't considered us, when the process isn't clear, we're going to show up as resistors and saboteurs. And I think the other thing for people listening, when you brought up Project Aristotle and psychological safety, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, go look it up. But when they looked at those 5 characteristics of the highest performing teams, that psychological safety was the catalyst for the other 4 factors to be in play, and it was the gatekeeper. So if it was strong, all these other factors of high performing teams were able to be there, and if it was missing, it impeded those other abilities. And so I just think it's so critical that you started with that, because you're right, for people who are listening to this, if you are a formal people leader, because we believe everybody can show up as a leader, and having that role and title does not make you a leader, to your point. If you just dictate or whatever, if you look back and you have an empty room behind you, meaning no one is following you, that's not leadership. That being said, if you're listening and you have that formal leadership role, it's so important to remember that you have the largest influence over psychological safety, over the employee experience, over culture, because it resides at that local team level. And for those of you who are listening who don't have a formal leadership role, we can take these principles into our lives. Are you creating a space of psychological safety with one single person, whether it is a friend, whether it is the barista, if you're getting coffee, whether it is the checkout person, whoever it is you interact with at a one-on-one level or even a group level in your family, in your community, etc., you also can create that space of psychological safety. So this conversation is for everybody with that, but that is a critical starting point. So I love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. And again, if you're not asked your opinion, if you're not asked to be a part of it, if the people closest to the work are not having their opinions considered about how a process or something should be better, all you're going to do is piss them off. And they're going to be like, screw you. So that, yeah, we have to enroll people and we have to engage them, because we don't want compliance. We want that engagement. We want that commitment. 1 billion trillion percent. Let's talk about how we get that. Let's go. I'm so excited. I don't know what these are. So y'all, I'm learning with you and I'm super, super excited. Talk to us about the 8 architects then of influence, and let's start putting this into action.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've worked with thousands of leaders around the world, and I really tried to examine, leaders from companies like LinkedIn, Notion, Microsoft, Google, worked with tons of leaders at the biggest companies at the highest levels. And I really looked at what are the key skills that make some leaders better than others? Why are some leaders able to rally and mobilize support while other leaders really struggle? Or maybe they have an initial spike when they first get hired, but then really continue to struggle to get people to make meaningful impact. And so what I developed is this proprietary framework called the 8 Archetypes of Influence. And so the way that I like to think about it is each of the archetypes represents a mindset that we need to have as a leader. And then underneath that, I have a framework and a step-by-step framework for how do you actually achieve the skill that's associated with that mindset. We probably won't have time to go into every single element of every single step-by-step framework today, but we're going to at least get a high-level look at it. And so, we can start with each one of the archetypes, and we want to go through it one by one. Maybe I share a little bit about each one, and then we can talk a little bit about.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay, so the first one, I like to start first with the people who are easiest to influence. So the way that I normally formulate it is we work on the archetypes that help us influence the people who are easiest to influence, and then we move out to the people who are hardest to influence. So people who are easiest to influence are those who are our direct reports. They're easier to influence because we have authority over them. And so versus maybe our manager or cross-functionally or people we're in conflict with, or even employees who are maybe not performing at the moment. So I start with the employees who have maybe been at the company for a little bit of time, but in this moment, and they performed well over time, but right now they're kind of stuck. And so the first archetype is the coach archetype. And coaches, what they know best is they believe in the potential of their employees. They know that if they believe their employees can achieve, that it isn't about laziness. It's actually about understanding what's the root issue going on here for my employee. And so the key skill that's associated with coaching is being able to ask great questions. And this is a really important skill. And so, being able to ask quality questions, not just yes or no questions, but instead of asking, why isn't the project finished? What might be holding up this project? Using what language rather than why language? Being able to really examine the root cause of what might be going on for their employee. Because so often as leaders, we think it's about having the right answer, but it's actually about asking the right question. Because the higher up we get in leadership, the less we remember, the less we know about what it's like to be on the ground floor. And so we need to ask the right question to diagnose the right problem. If as a leader, we give a great solution, but if it's to the wrong problem, that's still the wrong solution.
I regularly refer to this as facilitating self-reliant problem solving. And I love that you brought up not asking the why questions, right? What and how, because why automatically while well intended, invites defensiveness, where people feel like they have to defend their position, or they feel like they're being questioned, or they feel like they're being judged. It does something psychologically in our brain. But rather than why did you do it this way, help me understand, or how did you come to this, or what about this process? So asking those, it invites that curiosity, it invites that dialogue, it invites that self-reliant problem solving. And you're right. I mean, I even think about in our small company, I always joke, I'm like, "Oh, that stuff's beyond my pay grade." I have no idea how some of the inner workings of these various things work. I just know that I have amazing team members who do these things, and I rely on them. And the nitty-gritty, it's gonna be like the peanuts. I'm gonna start hearing "wah, wah, 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 wah," right? Like, my brain can't absorb it, and it doesn't need to. It's like, let people work in their geniuses, but you need to understand enough to be able to, whether it's report status or keep things moving forward or whatever it might be. So I think I do see this a lot with some of the leaders that we support and consult with and coach as well, that have we call it our faulty programs, but have this mindset that somehow, yeah, they do have to have the answers. They don't want to look stupid, that they have to perform. When in reality, it's like, no, your value comes from calling other people to greatness, asking really good questions and leveling them up. Like, that's your superpower, not being the person in the room who's the smartest. If you're the smartest in the room, you're not hiring the right people and you're not leading effectively, period.
I love that. Yeah, one way I like to think about it is when you become a leader, when you move from being an individual contributor to being a leader, what happens is you go from the person being in the spotlight to being the person holding and directing the spotlight.
Yeah, you're like the wizard behind the curtain.
Right, exactly, the wizard behind the curtain, and that's a really big shift. And so that's the first archetype that I like to start people off with, because it's a really great mindset shift for us to pivot from, and something that's counterintuitive to how a lot of people think about leadership.
Yeah. Love it. Okay, what's the next one? I know we're not gonna get to all of them, but I love it. I love it already.
The next one is maybe sometimes easier to influence, maybe sometimes way harder to influence. It's ourselves. And so it's the monk mindset. And what monks know really well is that in order to manage others, we have to first know how to manage ourselves. If we go into a meeting and we're dysregulated, we're anxious, if we're out of control, how's our team going to show up? They're going to be anxious and out of control too. And so the skill of the monk archetype is really learning how to regulate ourselves, how to look at our thoughts more clearly. So learning how to, if we have to give a difficult feedback conversation, how to regulate ourselves beforehand so that we can show up with compassion, care, and clarity for our employee. If we have to, pitch a new project, how can we show up with that gravitas? Well, it's about regulating ourselves. And those skills are sometimes as simple as breathing, which can seem trite and overdone, but there's so much science that backs up that just taking a few deep breaths, going for a walk, doing something before something that's going to make you nervous can help you regulate. So, really, the skill is about looking at those thoughts that we might have that are counterproductive, that might be saying negative things about ourselves, and looking at our dysregulation and how can we regulate ourselves so we can show up better for our team.
Yes, we call it like the head trash. The head trash that gets in our way. And I love that you brought like the breath. We've been talking about this a lot recently. Calm is our leadership superpower, and breath is the source of calm. And even like a couple years ago, McKinsey put out, their latest studies looking at deliberate calm, and like in this volatile world, we have to move from that reactivity. We have to be able to regulate ourselves. What we found in our work, we call this like the stuckness zone. It's the more disruptive our world gets, the more that those biological instincts of reactivity, self-protection, et cetera, kick in, and we have a gap. And so I love that idea of the monk, because it really is for us to move through the stuckness zone. Part of it is we've got to know where our faulty head trash programming is coming from, but then we have to have those very tactical things: breath, do this, shift this mindset, try this on instead, or we stay hijacked. So, yeah, I think about the person sitting there going, oh, but it's not like we have to meditate for hours. We just have to know ourselves really well, know the signs and signals we're triggered and hijacked, and then embrace calm as that leadership superpower. Love it.
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes there's a concept I call above and below the line. Are we dysregulated, and we're below the line? Are we anxious? Are we stressed? Are we tense? Or are we feeling like we're going to be able to be a little bit more curious, a little bit more open? Doesn't mean that we have to have everything's butterflies and roses. That's not what, calmness means. Calmness means that our ability to see the struggles, see the things that are going wrong, and still be able to show up in that powerful driving forward position that's calm and grounded.
We use above and below the line too. I love that concept because it's so simple but so powerful. And I'm curious what your thoughts on this, going on a slight tangent, but I think it's totally related to this, Jess, is one of the things that we teach, and when we teach above and below the line with groups and with teams, one, it gives a common language, not just a self-regulation from the monk standpoint, but from a shared and common language. If teams have that, when you do a team check-in, you can do a check-in of how are people doing today, and they can either go around riding the line, above the line, below the line, or do hand signals if you're, if you are virtual but you have cameras on. The other thing is, as a leader, to say to your team, like, y'all, I'm trying today, but just want you to know I'm below the line. So please bear with me. I don't have to get into why I'm below the line, but now my team doesn't have to make up a narrative and story why I might be less personable today, or why I might be quieter, or I might be more frantic. And again, it doesn't give me a pass to be a jerk to people. It's not like, oh, right? Here we go. Rosie gets a free pass today because she's below the line. It's communicating to them, I'm on the struggle bus and please bear with me. I'm sharing, I'm being vulnerable, psychological safety, sharing my humanness and asking for a little grace. But also, I still have to regulate so that that below the lineness doesn't take over. So I have to pause and reread emails 4 times before I send them, text messages, Slack messages. Like, you have to pause so much more when you're in that dysregulated below the line state, but that's a critical part of it. And I don't know, we like using the shared language. I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that or how that comes up in your work.
Yes, absolutely. I love that you said that. I was just at an offsite last week where I was leading a team and we were talking about the same concept, the shared language. And I was teaching them to be able to use this concept just to help them gain more awareness. You don't have to tell the whole story of everything that's going on in your life, but gaining a little bit more awareness helps you have more control of the situation. And when they have that shared language, when you introduce shared language to your whole team, people are able to be on the same page. They're able to have a little bit of a mental note. Okay, I need to have a little bit more compassion here. This person is having a little bit of a tougher day. Or even noticing for themselves, oh, maybe I'm having a tougher day. It seems like I'm a little bit more below the line. And it might be hard sometimes to get ourselves to get above the line, but just noticing that we're there, maybe we might give ourselves a little bit more grace. Maybe we might like you said, check your email, read it a little bit slower, do something a little bit more. But yeah, great point right there.
Love it. Love it. Okay, good. Okay, what's the next archetype? We got 2 down.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next one is the scientist. And the scientist is one of my favorite ones because if you have great scientists, what they know that they should do well is they should observe things objectively without judgment or bias. And so the scientist is all around how do we actually give effective feedback as leaders? So, how do we actually make sure that when we're looking at what someone is doing and when we're going to be giving them qualitative and quantitative feedback, how do we make sure that it is objective? That it doesn't use terms like, oh, they're lazy or they didn't try hard enough, or even that you want them to be more strategic. Well, what do any of those words mean? They mean a lot of things to different people. Even the word be more strategic, though you think you're being soft or kind, isn't actually clear. And so, how do we actually be as objective and as specific as possible about what the person is doing? Well, maybe there was too many words on the slide for their presentation. And can we be specific about that? And so the scientist is all around how do we actually nail down with specificity what the person is doing that we want them to change. And this is a big transition from when anyone is an individual contributor to being a manager, to being a leader, is they have to learn this skill from I'm not doing, but now I need to be specific about how things need to be done.
Yes, it reminds me, I have a colleague that she always says, "Specific is terrific." That's what
Yes, I love that.
but it is so true because so often, again, just like you, we do a ton of work with leaders and teams, and one of the things that I see, I don't care how long someone's been in a leadership role, even if they're the CEO of an organization, that specificity goes out the window, whether they're trying to give direction and expectations on a project or a strategy, or they're trying to give specific feedback. There's so much vagueness. Well, I need you to be more authentic, or you're too stressed, or this or that. And they're not having a specific conversation on what does done look like? Like, specifically, what does that mean? Or they're also not checking for alignment. It is they're asking that closed loop question of, are we good? Yep. Understand? Yep. And one person's walking away from the conversation with one understanding of how things are supposed to go or what they're supposed to do. And the other person is walking away with a different. And then they're frustrated when they didn't intersect the way that they thought. And so I think that is so critical. And it is a skill to build because going back to your other archetypes, we have head trash that gets in our way. the faulty programs that we've uncovered, several of them bump up against people's ability to effectively have those growth feedback or expectation setting conversations for a variety of reasons, because either they're a control freak or they're a people pleaser or whatever. So they have this narrative that keeps them from being specific, that keeps them from being objective. But it is such a critical skill. And we have found from our research of looking at leaders that 74% of leaders are trying to work at getting better at some aspect of feedback. So it's huge.
Totally. And so, like I mentioned before, each archetype has a framework step by step for how you actually achieve this skill. We can't go into every single framework step by step today, but I want to give two of the tips that are really important that come with feedback that I think often people forget. And the first one is we need to ask for permission before we go and give feedback. And this is really critical. And some people will say, but Jess, what if they say no? Well, if they say no, number one, they weren't going to be open to hearing your feedback anyways. And two, it's not about if you can ever give them feedback. Sometimes it's a when. So do you have a few minutes for me to discuss, some feedback I have for you on the presentation you gave me this morning? You always want to be specific on topic, because if you just say, can we talk? Someone thinks they're getting fired.
Oh, yeah, don't ever do that. God, don't ever do that. And people do it all the time. But we can have a whole conversation about that. Yes.
Totally. There was one CEO that I was working with once and I taught, and he was like, his face just dropped when I said this. He was just like, oh my God, that's why my employees always freak out when I have to speak with them. He's like, I always wonder why they're always so nervous. He was like, I'm just asking if we can talk.
Because you didn't give any context of why, and their brain is going, holy crap, I'm in trouble. Well, stop it. Give them context. Anyway, yes.
Oh, we ask for permission. And what that does is it downregulates their system. It allows them to prepare, it allows them to be ready for it. And then the second key tip I want to give, we're not going into everything, but the second key tip is do not sandwich the feedback. If it is critical feedback, we do not want to sandwich it. I've had so many people who they want to be nice, they want to be kind. And so they say a good thing, then they say the really thing that they're worried about, then they say another good thing. And what happens is the employee leaves and they're really confused. They don't actually get the piece that you wanted them to deliver. Now, this doesn't mean that we aren't going to be kind to them. How we do this is we separate the relationship from the content. The relationship is like, I care about you. I believe in your potential. You can say that. And then what's the content? What's the specific behavior that they're not doing that's not acceptable? But you don't need to say you're doing all these amazing things and this one thing wrong.
Yeah, there's a reason we call it the crap sandwich. And it's so funny. I was on a webinar panel just recently, and I was watching all the chats come through. There's a bunch of us talking, and someone in there was like, oh, yeah, use the sandwich method, or even like the articles on LinkedIn. And I was like, oh my God, please no, whoever, like, stop it, stop it, stop it. Horrible, crap sandwich, shit sandwich, whatever you want to call it. It's awful. Like, so don't do it.
Even worse, twice it's somehow been spread everywhere.
Oh, but once upon a time, that's what was taught. On the surface, it feels kind of, start with something nice, but that thing you said, this is what I always say. I always say that thing you said before you did the feedback feels now very insincere, like it's not a legitimate acknowledgement, recognition, whatever it is. And the next time you actually want to recognize people, they're sitting there, they're on high alert because they're waiting for the other shoe to drop. They're waiting for the but. And to your point, a lot of times it's confusing, et cetera. So yeah, like mic drop on those. Those are like our two critical ones too. And I think the other thing when you talk about asking for permission, I would say it's critical, period, especially if you're going lateral, or up. And even if it's someone that you have responsibility for, like a kid, you need to give them feedback, or someone on your team. I love that you brought up the make sure you're one telling them what it is, because so they don't add in, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble, or they know what they're talking about. But it's like, is this a good time? Like, I have feedback I want to give you. I think it's going to help you grow, or I want to help you get to the next level. So you're stating that intention, and I want to make sure this is a good time and you can receive it. And I think that's important too, like for us to receive feedback, because I've had people that say, are you open to feedback? And I'm like, I am. And I am not in a spot right now that I know that I can hear you. And if you care enough to give me the gift of feedback, I need you to know that I'm not in a spot to receive it. And that's not honoring or fair to you. Can we try to connect tomorrow? Is this urgent, or can we connect tomorrow? Because I really want to be in a spot that I can receive it. And I just know I'm not in a good headspace right now. Like, we also, going back to your monk, we have to know if we're not in a spot to receive it and communicate that. Or if someone starts to say, I'm open to feedback, I gotta let you know I'm not in a good spot today. Can we have this conversation tomorrow when I know that I can receive it more openly?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so important. And so I want to move us on to the next one that's kind of related, which is the teacher archetype. And the teacher archetype knows that everything that can be said clearly. And then we simplify everything for the learner. And these two kind of play in tandem because when someone is new to an organization or when we're putting a new task on their plate, we need to get really good at being a teacher because so often we jump to giving feedback when really what we need to do is teach them better. And so if someone has been at the company for a long time and now they're not performing or they haven't done something right, then we give them feedback. But if they're new and they have a high level of motivation, we don't want to deflate that whole balloon. And so the way that we do that is we teach them, and we can teach them by walking them through step by step how we do something. We can do it by doing it in tandem with them. We can watch them do it and give less of feedback, but give it more like, responsive of how are they doing on it. Or, we can finally at the end start to give them autonomy. But it's really important to simplify. And there's something that I call the curse of knowledge, which is that the higher we get up, the smarter we get, the more we have technical expertise, the harder it is to remember what it was like to be a beginner, to not know what we know. And so why I say we got to be a teacher is because, a teacher who is, teaching a child how to color is not going to get mad at the child if they don't know how to color within the lines on the first time that they've been given crayons. And so it's something that we actually have to take on. And we have to take it on as we're not doing a good job at teaching them if they're not doing something right in the early stages. And so it's something about how we're explaining it and not about how they're receiving it.
Yeah, I love that. And there's two things that I want to add to that come up for me. And one is that I think also, too, when we think about being a teacher, the way that I've looked at it and we've taught our clients is it also can be maybe I'm not the one to teach you, but I am going to connect you with the resources that I think are going to help you upskill and learn because I don't necessarily have that expertise or I don't have the time, but I'm here to be that. Hey, I'm going to connect you with that and then check in. How did that go? Was that helpful? What more do you need? Hey, go talk to so and so, so and so. Can you mentor this person? So I can be that, connect them to the resources without necessarily having to be the one because I may not know the technical aspects of the job. And the second thing that I think is important that I would add on what you said is sometimes, like, just take like when COVID hit, you got people who maybe they've been with the organization a long time, they've got deep expertise, and then we take for granted that just because someone is an expert at a lot of things, when you have new variables, new situations, new technologies, they are now back in a beginner seat again. So, like people who did not know how to use Zoom or Teams or some of these things had to figure it out, or having to learn how to navigate a hybrid work environment, or having to learn how to, we used to have two people do this, but now we can't because we have to be 6 feet apart. I mean, you just take everything that happened when COVID hit, it was a whole lot of unlearning and relearning where people are used to being the expert and now find themselves in that very unsettling beginner territory. And they don't like to be new. They don't like to not know what they're doing. They don't like to, and they maybe aren't speaking up to say they don't know. They're just suffering through on their own or getting frustrated. Or the leader forgets, well, because they're my star performer, anything I throw at them, they should be able to do. No, they're your star performer and are ready to grow. But when you give them something that's new, they're going to be new at that for a while. They're not going to be a star performer right off the bat. So I think we also have to not just look at tenure of employee, but keep in mind that it's really task or goal specific.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in the interest of time, I want to move us on to the next one, which is the politician.
Ooh, okay. Politician, let's go.
So it was a little spicy. I'm not sure if I like politicians right now. What I learned, I was a journalist before I actually worked in AI, and I won 2 Emmys for my work at ABC News. And one of the things that I loved
She
watching,
has an Emmy sitting behind her, by the way. If you're like, yeah, there we go.
that's in a telly.
Well, that's a tell you. Oh, no, because the Emmy has the globe. That's right. I'm like, oh, there we go. Anyway, sorry.
But what I learned from watching politicians is they are really good at rallying people behind a bigger mission, behind a bigger vision. What's the future that we're trying to create together? And so I have kind of a 7-step formula for how do we get buy-in for our strategy, which is that politician archetype. I want to pull out a couple of key qualities from it. So the first one that politicians, especially local politicians, do really well, I've seen so many mayors, governors do this, is they do what's called a listening tour. Before they even announce that they're running for office, they go around and they start talking to constituents and figure out what's the key problems they're dealing with here. What do they actually care about? And then they shape their message based upon some of that. And we as leaders forget to do that. I've seen so many leaders do AMAs, ask me anything at the end once they've had their strategic announcement, and they get all this pushback and they wonder why. It's because they didn't get their team bought in from the very early stages. And there's so much research that backs this up. Even if you go in a different direction than what your employees wanted, if you allowed them to feel heard, feel part of the process, they're more likely to be bought in at the end than if they never got to have any say.
100%. Yeah, that's the research on fair process that we talk about in our work too. And you know who does this really well? I love that you brought up the listening sessions. We just were talking to a client about doing some of that for their group yesterday, actually, because I think people forget or they don't know how to do it well, or they think the listening sessions are town hall meetings. And to your point, they are communicating and then taking a couple questions, and or when they're asking the questions, they aren't sitting there and truly listening. They want to defend. They want to start giving explanations like, nope, your job is to sit and shut up and just take the feedback and then circle back later with, thank you for all of that. And then here's what we are or not going to do based on your feedback. And a person who does this so well is Bob Chapman. He is the CEO of Barry Wehmiller. And if you haven't looked at his book, it's been out 10 years now. Everybody Matters with Raj Sisodia. But Bob's a friend, and I've sat and witnessed him conduct listening sessions. And he goes around, I mean, he's a global company, billions and billions of dollars, but he goes around and has his tour every year and does listening sessions. And they're always around a very specific topic so you don't get recreational complaining. And, there's someone in there that is scribing, but here he is, CEO of this multi-billion-dollar global company who understands the power and goes around. And there's a reason that McKinsey and others have studied them and they are thriving because he does that so well. And it's not beneath him that senior leaders are, he's not dictating it down. He's like, no, this is critical for me as a CEO. I think so many people get to that level and their calendar is jammed and they don't think they have time. But that is so critical because they waste so much time on the resistance, the confusion, the lack of alignment, to your point, because they weren't part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another key just element of the politician is being able to use some elements of storytelling. Doesn't mean we're going to tell an hour-long story, but who are the central characters that we're trying to help with this mission, with the new strategy that you're announcing? Is it a specific team? Is it a client? Is it a customer? And how can you weave a little bit of storytelling into what you're doing, into the mission statement, into the new strategy so that more people can rally behind it?
Yeah, I love that because we connect through story, right? Facts and figures are bleh, but stories are memorable. So I love it. Well, okay, so we got through 5 of the 8. That's not too bad. And so we're gonna keep people in suspense, and we'll put resources in the show notes page where people can go and learn more about your archetypes because I love this, and I love that you have very tangible action steps. Like all of them sound just like they're amazing. But I've got to shift gears. Speaking of telling stories, and speaking of, I'm going to bring it back to the monk of your archetype. As I've alluded to, we've identified these 7 faulty programs that people have, and we just know that no matter how much work we've done on ourselves, no matter how maybe sage our inner monk is, that we all, as human beings, to some extent, tell ourselves stories that get in our own way that keep us safe and small. And so, what I would love for you to share, Jess, is in spite of all of your wisdom and work, what is a self limiting story that you still tell yourself sometimes? And what do you do when it shows up so that you can move beyond it and still influence and show up as a leader in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I have many of these, as many of us do. We all have so many stories that we tell ourselves that limit us. And one of the biggest ones has been a big narrative for me throughout my career. And, I've had to really work to overcome it is that if I take up space, that others will dislike me. That if I speak up, that I will lose connection. And so for a long time in my career, I would not speak up. I would not share my ideas or I would share it privately and I wouldn't use my voice. I was so afraid. I would get this like constriction in my throat. And I've had to do a lot of work on that and it still shows up. Right now it's showing up as I know I need to be posting more on LinkedIn, sharing some of my wisdom. And there's this giant amount of fear that comes up. Then I'm like, oh my gosh, all my friends are going to hate me. People I know and love are going to dislike me. They're going to think I'm annoying and taking up too much space if I post and share some of the things on my LinkedIn page. And so it's being a process of continuing to remind myself some of the things I have to share are really valuable and are actually really helping a lot of leaders out there. And I have over 5,000 people who are on my newsletter right now, and they love the content I'm sharing. So I need to remember that that content is actually valuable elsewhere.
Yes, yes. I would say 1, yes, just from this conversation, and I will say, I've gone through that as well, and so many of the leaders that we work with, and I think it is I call it I have, like, a visceral reaction to people that on any social media platform that I perceive are being what I would call the me monsters, that it's just like, "Me, me, me," boasting about me, and it's like, "Bleh," or "I don't care what you had for dinner," or "I don't," like, it's like, what is the point? But you can tell the difference when someone is trying to add value, to give you a resource or give you something to think about or helping you understand your experience or move forward, that's adding value. And so I would just say for you, like everything you have is absolutely adding value. And we've had to put our mindset, like, I'm like, no, I don't want to do a post like this. If it's not going to add value, if it's not going to help, be that bright spark in someone's day to help them show up as a leader, then what is the point of posting it? Like that intention matters hugely. So I would just say, yes, please take up space. And I think everyone listening would say, yes, please take up space. So,
Yeah, and I think there's another element that's interesting for us to look at too, which is like when I see those other posts that I cringe on, it's transference in some way. What is it saying that I am cringing at that behavior? Why am I judging that behavior? Why am I judging someone else? Is there something that now I'm judging about myself that I don't need to be judging both them and myself? Can I just allow them to share what's right for them? If they love their dinner, why can't they share it with the world if they want to?
yeah, true. There is, that is true, right? Yeah. So here we go. Look in the mirror. Bing. Anyway, love it. Okay. So much
It's
wisdom.
something that we all do, and it's worth, continuing to look at.
100%. I hate it, right? Those invitations to look in the mirror. Damn it. Anyway, curses. Okay. Are you ready for quick questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, let's go. Fill in the blank. Living authentically is.
Trusting my highest intuition.
Love that. When the world is presenting an opening, but you don't feel like showing up as a leader, what do you do?
Check in and see why there's resistance. Is the resistance needed? Is the resistance like, oh, maybe I'm actually don't have the expertise that's in this zone. And so maybe I should let someone else take up that space. Or is the resistance that I'm scared or that I don't think I have the skills or I don't believe in myself? And so it's about looking at where the resistance is coming from and then examining that.
That is the lesson of if there's resistance, don't shy away from it. You got to lean into it, which is sucking. But oh, see, that's what I'm going to sit with today. Go into the resistance. Don't fight the resistance. Okay. What is something people would be surprised to know about you?
I have a second degree black belt in Taekwondo.
Nice. My son's a first degree. I was like, that was hard enough. Like, you're badass.
Yeah, I trained for over 10 years. I did, all sorts of nunchucks, weapons, knives,
Oh my god. And how many bricks did you have to break to get to second degree?
many over the time. It was very hard as a small woman.
Yes. Oh my god. I love it. Oh, go. That's amazing. All right. What is your favorite go-to movie?
Oh, that's a great question. I normally don't rewatch movies. I have a hard time rewatching anything because I don't like not having the suspense anymore. So the idea of a movie that I've watched twice, I think it's there's very rare that I've rewatched a movie. The only show I rewatched is actually Severance. I rewatched the first season with my partner because there were so many little Easter eggs that I thought that one was worth rewatching.
Oh my god. Okay, well there you go, Severance. That's amazing. All right, what's your go-to song? Do you listen to a song more than once?
Yes, I do. I love Taylor Swift. All of her songs are definitely amazing, pump up songs. I Want to Dance with Somebody is something that I often play. My partner and I will just play it. We'll just start dancing in the house. It's amazing.
Oh my god, I love it. Yeah, you don't wanna hear me sing Whitney, but that is a good one. Love it. Okay, what is something you can't live without?
Fruit.
Any particular fruit?
I am obsessed with rare fruits and people have never found before. Like I rarely now these days find a fruit that I haven't tried before, but it's the most exciting thing in the world when I do. I love all sorts of fruit. I love raspberries, I love blackberries, I love bananas, I love mangoes, cherries. Fruits are just
You go for, like, the star fruit and the ugly fruit and all those funky ones? Or
every
okay.
fruit is just the best.
That's amazing. I think I've never had someone answer that. That's fantastic. Besides fruit, what is something in your ordinary daily life that makes your heart happy?
My family and my partner. Friendship is just what makes me most happy is connection. That's why I'm so invested in helping people build relationships because they're just so good when you have them.
Yeah, well, and we are neurobiologically hardwired for connection, so why not help people do it better? So I'm all in. And what are you grateful for right now?
I am grateful for my health right now. Really grateful for my health.
It's a good thing to have. It's a very good thing to have. We could talk for hours more, but I'm going to do one closing question, Jess. If you could challenge leaders everywhere to practice this one behavior that would create more human workplaces and equip everyone to show up as a leader, what would that be?
Curiosity. Just take a second more to be a little bit more curious, whether it's asking a question or just considering in your own mind their perspective. Being more curious will help us a lot more in the workplace and in our world.
Mic drop, 100%. I think we've lost so much of that curiosity and we're so stuck in judgment. So, amen, sister. Well, this has been such a delight. I could talk to you for hours, but thank you so much for geeking out with me. Thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for all the wonderful nuggets we've gotten and our reminder to quote Taylor Swift, I always say, right? It's her I'll stare directly at the sun but never in the mirror. When the resistance is happening, you got to look in the mirror, people.
Yeah, and I'd love to just share if anyone wants to find more information, if they want to learn about the rest of the archetypes, go to jessgoldberg.com/resources. And I have a resource that you can download that's a free guide with my 8 archetypes of influence. So you can kind of read about all of them there. There's also another document that you can sign up for to get a bunch of my free frameworks.
Fantastic. And we will also put the links in the show notes in case anybody missed that or you're driving or on for a run or walk or something while you're listening to this. So fantastic. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I'm Rosie Ward, and this is Show Up as a Leader. To learn more, head over to PeopleForwardNetwork.com and, of course, hit that follow button.